what shouldn't be a political issue, but is. Yep, it never bothered me personally, and I'm at fault for that because I'm heterosexual and therefore never impacted by it. But my wife is from a different part of our country, and a gay friend of mine once said, "How would you feel if overpaid men in suits got to say no? We don't approve of that, and you couldn't marry her?" I admit I should have already been more conscious of the issue, but since then I fully sympathize with anyone denied marriage equality, and strongly support marriage equality. Legal marriage should never have been called that, and we wouldn't have this issue. Marriage should be a religious thing where you can at any time you want without getting any legal standing, also meaning no protection from any charges for having sex with minors, etc. The legal thing can be called something else and require you only to meet minimum requirements, age, ability to contract, etc., sign legal papers in front of a notary and register them with the government. But here we are, with folks mixing legal marriage with religious marriage and putting the rules for the latter on the former. I'm going to give an issue that is actually local to us, whether we realize it or not. As an American, city versus county jurisdiction. It really irritates me to know and that you can have your county fire departments and your city fire departments, or city police and county sheriff, or other thing like parks, libraries, trash collection, etc., that often have overlapping jurisdiction, or they have their corner and the other has the other corner, and they don't cooperate. Or, what I hear often on the news is cases of fire, emergency, police, etc., where a person lives in one city or out in unincorporated areas, and the next city or county fire, police, etc., is closer to them, but it takes longer to respond because it's not our jurisdictions. These local city, county dick measuring contests are annoying. People do end up getting hurt, they're stupid, and it is something that affects a lot of us whether we realize it or not, because two different agencies can't talk to one another or cooperate. This issue is about human lives and should not be politicized. I lived a quarter mile outside of a small city within a large county, and a half mile from the next county line, when I called 911 for our house actively burning and the fire spreading. I was met with questions of if I was in the other county, or was in my county, or was I within the city limits of said city, all of which have separate fire departments. After going round and round I finally screamed through hysterics that I didn't give a fuck which goddamn fire trucks they sent. Just hurry the fuck up. Not my proudest moment, and I actually called the non-emergency line the next day to tell that poor dispatcher how sorry I was for screaming at her. But come on, there's a fire. Find the closest firehouse and send them. It ain't hard. I will say, while this is sad in a lot of aspects, it's also pretty funny at times when the stakes aren't high. When I was a kid, I lived a few houses down from the border between two cities. The border was a road, one side of the street was houses and in one city, and the other side of the street was woods and a park of another street. Well, one day somebody found a gun lying in the woods and called the authorities, and the police departments of both showed up and tried to claim it wasn't their problem. The street we're on is in your city, it's your problem. The gun is in the woods, not on the street. It's your problem. This went on for literally hours. Nobody wanted to have jurisdiction of it, because they didn't want to do the paperwork. Ultimately, the state police had to step in and ended up taking charge of the situation. While I don't doubt what you're saying happens probably more often than it should, countries and cities often do talk to and cooperate with each other, especially in areas that are unincorporated. The slower response times are usually due to the time it takes for information to get to the correct party rather than people purposefully being slower due to ego. Also, the level of service for emergency vehicles and the area can be a large factor on how long it takes the authorities to get there. My fiancé had a problem when he was a kid. Not with police but with school districts. He lived in the back of a RV park, had mobile homes and whatnot, and because it was around the district line of two schools they fought back and forth. He had to keep going from one school to the other, back and forth. He said he was young, he had mental issue as a kid that needed help, and he didn't learn a darn thing during the months they fought to have him, or they would go, "No, you aren't in our district." It was a shit show for sure. I live right by a fairly large highway interchange. The road it's on is right on the border of two cities, so we get large snowstorms, which is quite often. Both cities save plowing that road until the very end, hoping that the other city will get to it first. Come on, that's the one road that literally everybody who lives within a 10-mile radius uses. These fuckers would rather waste time and money plowing a mile-long stretch of road that leads to a public park that is closed in the winter, so nobody uses that road, rather than plowing the mile-long stretch of road that everybody needs in order to get to work on time, just so they can potentially save a buck by having the other side do it first. That's complicated. The accuracy of science is not a political issue. How to enact changes in the face of scientific data absolutely is. For example, we are not far from being able to use CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing in humans. That is the science. Whether that ought to be done in neutral per parent's wishes is an ethical and therefore a political issue. Public health is a big one that is definitely political. Just because a public health study determined that a policy would be beneficial to an outcome does not mean it ought to be done when considering the broader role of the state. Well, thing is when people start using the phrase government should, the issue necessarily becomes a political issue, not a scientific one. What government does is always a political issue, and scientists aren't saints. They're assholes just like everyone else, except they're generally more opinionated. Normally in science things are black and white and a theory can be unquestionably disproved. But when things are complicated and it isn't black and white, just shades of gray, and all theories are necessarily wrong, but it's really a question of is this a good enough approximation? Then the knives come out and scientists show their true underlying salary. My area is public policy analysis. I see this literally all the time. I'm from Northern Ireland and our politics is so messed up. Religion is brought into basically every matter. The main political party is homophobic and anti-Irish. The second main party just wants a united Ireland and all other things are less important. Even though we are not ready for a united Ireland, the main party basically aren't for anything. They just are against what the second main party want, and this is basically all they do. The second main party politicized the Irish language instead of just letting the people speak it and brought so much controversy into a language. The two main party have zero common ground and are more interested in working against each other than with each other. Our former main leader, who only lasted a week, thinks the earth was created 6,000 years ago. Separation of church and state does not mean that religion should have no place in politics. It means that the church should be separate from the state as organizations. The First Amendment says that the state can't respect an establishment of religion, which is 1780s English for the state can't support any religious organization, not the state cannot have Christian values. It also says that the state can't prohibit the free exercise of religion, which also doesn't mean that governments in the United States cannot have Christian values. It means that the state can't say no. You can't be insert religion, regardless of what religious values it holds. For example, a state may prohibit polygamy, but it can't say that you can't be Mormon, only that you can't have several wives. The virus itself never should have become political, and it's disheartening to see how many people downplay its significance or outright deny its existence for political reasons. But the government's reaction to it is 100% a political issue. I've complied with the mask mandates and stay-at-home orders, because I understand why they were needed, but I'm deeply worried that the measures taken during the pandemic will become precedent. Our government has a bad habit of using emergencies to push policies that would otherwise be seen as unacceptable. Confirmation bias. I mean people not wanted but needed to earn living and live lives, so they found reasons to ignore it. Think it part of it too was it was weaponized in politics to attack people. And near cult-like following of that leader, which once again confirmation bias, seeking information that led to biased outcomes. Another big factor is healthcare itself. While the claims of 5 grams or whatever batshit ideas they are saying now are a bit much, they have in past had approved drugs seriously harm people, cause birth defects including a few of earlier vaccines. No, not autism but catching thing you're vaccinated against in large numbers, as well as medical complications. Some of stuff was intentional like Tuskegee. So rushed to production non-FDA-approved vaccine authorized under emergency conditions and still technically experimental. Yeah, I can see how people might be hesitant. This is coming from someone who is vaccinated. Not sure on this, in that I think it should be a political issue when minority rights aren't respected. I don't know how to explain it properly. But if it's not going to be a political issue if in a country these rights are not respected, who's gonna change that? I just think that in the majority of countries, read, probably all, it's surpassed that point and every political party has given its own twist on the matter, completely ignoring what it should be about. I'd queer the explanation, hope you get what I mean. Nothing. If people disagree about it, it's political. Whenever someone says that something should be beyond politics or above politics, what they really mean is that they want their view to hold sway and to force everyone to think the way that you do. Now fortunately, freedom of thought is a thing, and as of yet no one's found a way to 1984 people's minds, but they'll try. And that's one of the most immoral things we do, far more so than anything a person could ever think. Doesn't matter what evil a person wishes, whether they want genocide or slavery or rape, they still have the right to think it. If you don't like it, argue against it. You can think and say what you want just as much as they can, but stop with the beyond politics, because that makes you the one who's violating rights, and while that's not beyond politics, it's one point of politics that I'm willing to fight about. If I am arguing with someone about which version of Star Trek is best, that is not a political issue. It becomes political when the government is involved. When someone says something should be beyond politics, what that really means is it shouldn't be used as justification for the government to regulate something. When someone says religions should stay out of politics, it means you can't use religion as justification to ban something. In the case of marriage, regulations should be based off of avoiding abuse, not someone's religious beliefs. Regulations on food and alcohol should be based off of health and public safety, not religious beliefs. If you think Canada isn't also weak on border security, I have oceanfront property in Alberta to sell you. Look up the surge in illegal crossings during the Trump administration. Note that the crossers aren't Americans, but rather citizens of third countries who were either in the U.S. illegally, or had some temporary status threatened by the Trump administration. All of them found a loophole in the Safe Third Country Agreement and the whole country is now paying for them to stay in Canada while their asylum cases are processed, and if a claim is rejected, good luck actually locating the claimant to deport them. And even before the surge in foot crossings, we've always had issues with people who fly in legally with visas and just don't board their return flights when they're supposed to. Something even island nations like Australia and NZ regularly deal with. This is precisely why building a 30-foot wall is a waste of money. There isn't like an epidemic of people just hopping across borders to do bad shit. Most people who try to immigrate to a new place are doing so to find a better life for themselves or their families, not just to start shit. Also, there are plenty of places where border control doesn't exist. Take the United States, for example. All 50 states have completely open borders with each other. Sure, it's caused some annoyances, like Illinois getting undesirables from Indiana. I kid, but for the most part it's a boon to commerce. So you're using states within a country as an example of open borders? I live in a country of two entities, functioning similarly the way states within USA work. There is a difference between a country and a state within a country. I can cross into the other entity without problems, but I can't enter a neighboring country like it's my own. That's not how it works. There isn't an epidemic of people hopping across borders to do bad shit because of border control. And even with it, some bad people manage to enter. Why wouldn't thousands of them take the chance when a wealthy country decides to open borders now? What's stopping them? Certainly not the first line of defense, which is the border control. Remember the migrant crisis in Europe? I live in Europe, and any country that accepted millions of undocumented immigrants had a big increase in crime. Sure, you can say that most of those immigrants wanted to just escape war and seek a better life. You would be right, but that doesn't mean that tens of thousands of opportunists aren't gonna sneak in and enter a wealthy country like it's nothing to do some bad shit, because it happened many, many times. How does restricting abortion lead to genocide? Also, I'd be happy to explain why I think that abortion should be restricted. First of all, there's a world of difference between a vasectomy and an abortion. Nobody cares about you getting a vasectomy, not because you're a man, but because a vasectomy is a medical procedure that only affects you. Some people care about women getting abortions, not because she's a woman, but because it's a medical procedure that, by definition, kills someone else. You say abort her kid because you know that it is a child, so I don't need to explain that. Secondly, there's a similar world of difference between a woman using birth control and a woman getting an abortion. Birth control's purpose is to prevent a sperm cell from fertilizing an egg. When that egg is fertilized, a new human is created. So preventing it from happening is preventing a new human from being created. Since you're not doing anything to an existing human, there's no problem with that, although some may be opposed to that on religious grounds. The pro-life movement as a whole is not concerned with it. Abortion, like I said, is ending a human life. The reason people want it to be restricted by the government is that we think that the unborn child has a right to life like all other humans, and that its right to life trumps the woman's life to bodily autonomy. We think that the inconvenience she faces from the pregnancy, as severe as it may be, does not give her the right to kill her unborn child unless it is absolutely necessary to save her life. And, in my opinion, she should be allowed to have an abortion if it is early term and going through with the pregnancy would cause irreparable damage to her mental health. LGBT+ community, they're people, just like anyone else. They're wanting to marry, adopt a kid, and so on, should never be up for political debate. Healthcare. Everyone deserves healthcare. Whether we're poor, rich, or anywhere in between. Us getting healthcare shouldn't be a political debate. Facts over opinions. Facts are proven through science, through trial and error, etc. Opinions are things you feel very strongly about, that could hurt someone more than a fact could, especially if the opinion is incredibly wrong, dangerous and stupid. Abortion. I don't care much for abortion myself, but it's not my body. I should not be telling other people what they do with the unborn fetus is up to them. You can say, have them put the baby up for adoption. But tell me, how many children end up actually getting adopted? How many are still in the system not being adopted, and likely never will? And how many babies and even children get physically, mentally or sexually abused by their adopted family members? Even one is way too many. If a person realizes that they can't take care of the child, if they believe that abortion is the right option for them, then they should abort if they feel that choice is right for them. Whether or not a person with woman body parts, can get an abortion. Whether or not it's legal for me, someone who is ace and panromantic, to marry someone who is perceived as the same gender as me. I'm a femme-aligned non-binary person. I want to say drugs, but I know it needs to be one until society can get it through their damn thick skulls that addiction is an illness that can be treated, and throwing drug users in jail for possession or committing certain crimes while high or trying to get high is doing more harm than good. Whether or not it's okay for a police officer to shoot an unarmed black man, guess what? It's not fucking okay. Whatever the fuck is going on with those anti-trans bills, for fuck's sake, conservatives, there's supposed to be a separation of church and state, not laws based on religion. Not trying to say all conservatives, but brevity is a thing, and am trying to not be as long-winded. Vaccines shouldn't be fucking political, but as an autistic person who has chronic liver disease due to not getting the vaccine in time, I don't care about your rights, Karen. It's fucking stupid and selfish that you think having a child like me is worse than having a seriously ill and or dead child, and if I have to kidnap your child to get them their vaccines, I fucking will. Healthcare. Full stop. Healthcare is a human right. And politicizing it and not wanting healthcare provided by your country's government because it's socialist is fucking stupid, mom and dad.